lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing Evil Dead Rise, which was released April 21st, 2023, exclusively in theaters. But before we get into our review discussion, Rowan, I have a feeling you were looking forward to this one, considering we weren't supposed to record this episode until tomorrow. But, tell the folks at home whether or not you were looking forward to Evil Dead Rise.
Yeah, I mean, this is, this is probably the most formative franchise in my life. I've seen the Evil Dead movies more than any other movies ever. Wow. I watch these all the time. I'm just a huge Evil Dead head. So, I was super looking forward when I heard they were doing I don't know what you would call this. It's not a remake, but just an entry, I guess, an entry into the franchise. So I was excited about it, and yeah, I mean, there's not much else to say. I was just pumped from the get-go, even before trailers, just like reading about it. I was like, fuck yeah. And yeah, what about yourself? Were you excited? Or are you, I don't know if you're as big of an Evil Dead person as me or not, or...
No, I'm definitely not as big of an Evil Dead fan as yourself. Certainly wouldn't call myself an Evil Dead head. But, you know, I've seen them probably all once. So jeez. I have seen them. What I will say is that I do have favorable memories of the 2013 Evil Dead remake when it was in theaters, but I haven't gone back to watch it. I was thinking of maybe watching it before this one, but then I was worried about it feeling too similar, and as far as I knew going in, there was no like connective tissue or anything really, so I said, screw it. But specifically with Evil Dead Rise, I very much was looking forward to it. I thought the trailers were pretty great, and usually I don't watch trailers, but, you know, this was one that was literally before every horror movie for what it feels like the last 6 months. So, I mean, eventually I was going to either watch it or I was just going to consume it via osmosis of eventually sitting in the theater and blocking it out and, you know, it all sinking in. But yeah, I thought the trailers were pretty strong. Outside of that one guy shouting at that the movie sucked at the Q&A, this movie received a lot of positive buzz outside of its South by Southwest premiere. And once again, a lot of critics I follow were pretty favorable overall to it. And also, I feel like I'm one of the few people in the world that have actually seen Lee Cronin's previous movie, The Hole in the Ground. And I actually enjoyed that as well. I mean, that's a very different movie. But this movie also does feature a hole in the ground at one point, which I thought, I was like, oh, is that how he got the gig?
Connective tissue.
Yeah. So yeah, I was looking forward to it and hoping that it would very much live up to the hype that has kind of been building around this one. So I guess in the review, we'll mention, did it live up to the hype? But before we get that, let's throw it on over to the trailer.
This Friday,
Mom?
everybody here dies by dawn.
What's wrong with you, Mom?
Evil Dead Rise, rated R, only in theaters Friday.
What you just heard is from Evil Dead Rise, written and directed by Lee Cronin, and the story is as follows. A reunion between two estranged sisters gets cut short by the rise of flesh-possessing demons, thrusting them into a primal battle for survival as they face the most nightmarish version of family imaginable. Now, here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth, spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Evil Dead Rise?
Well, I'm going to give them as best as I can. I feel like I'm still processing. I'm pretty much just got out of it. So
yeah, like what? Like an hour ago, maybe?
Yeah, like an hour ago. Went with the whole family. Evil Dead is family fun, so you have to go.
What'd the family think of it? I mean, before your thoughts, what'd they all think overall? Generally good vibes, bad vibes?
Yeah,
split.
Exilia seemed to have really liked it. it.
Okay.
And my mother was, I'd say she was pretty good on it. She's a purist, so she's all about like the original 3 just in the 80s and the 90s there.
Not a big fan of the remake.
Yeah, I actually, the first time she ever saw the remake, I watched it with her, and she was all right on it, but, she just didn't like it as much. I think she liked the kind of the slapstick DIY type of stuff.
Yeah, the DIY. Yeah, the
DIY,
stuff. Yeah,
DIY.
a little bit lower. Yeah, lower budget feel.
As you can tell, I don't do anything by myself, so I don't know the acronyms for that. And then Dad was, I don't think he really cared.
Is he a big horror fan? You've mentioned your mom numerous times. No, he's not into it.
Yeah, no, my stepdad has like 0 attention span, so.
Okay.
And he always just makes fun of movies, so.
He would have rather be on a TikTok,
Yeah, essentially. That's his speed. But, so I came into this, I was very curious about what the tone of this was going to be, just because, like we said, we had the 2013 remake, which was just, depressing as depressing
very
can
serious.
Be. Yeah. Super serious, moving away from the camp. And, I think the trailers, they were pretty good at hiding what the tone was going to be of this. Because, even some of like the gore they hinted at, you're like, oh, okay, we're gonna get pretty like wild and rambunctious. But going into this, I can't say I was in love with the tone of it in general. I just felt it was kind of.
We'll be in agreement then. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of confused. I see what they were trying to do, where it was like, we don't want to be as serious as the 2013, but we don't want to be camp either. And yeah, I just felt that it was stuck in this middle where there was stuff that they should have went really outrageous on, I felt, which, if this was, 22-year-old Sam Raimi, like, that's what we would be getting. It's just like, how, a scene that should only be like 5 seconds, let's drag this out to 2 minutes so it's just like wild. And this was just like, it didn't want to revel in anything that it was creating. It just kind of wanted to get to the next thing.
Yeah, what I'll say about it is that I agree that tonally, I think this movie's kind of all over the place. I would even say, rather than just kind of pulled in 2 different directions, it's almost pulled in like 4 different directions. I think it goes from almost being like a slapstick comedy at times to then sort of like a middle of the road elevated horror movie trying to establish some like deeper familial themes and grief and all that, as we've mentioned, in the last couple of weeks, to like an all-out splatter fest that's just very much like kind of leaning into the gore, and giving those sorts of audience members what they want, to just kind of like an Evil Dead homage movie that for me felt a little bit hollow, but I mean, for other audiences may work better. But yeah, for me, it was just like kind of always jostling between these 4 tones that it left me a little bit confused at times, for sure, what we were supposed to feel ultimately.
I just felt like, if you were going to watch this with someone, I guess if you're going to watch this with someone that isn't, Rowan Fraser's mother, like, people would be like, oh man, this is pretty, this is like pretty bloody. They're really like, there's lots of blood in it, but it's just like, there was nothing visceral about it at all, which I think the remake really, really dug into. And then, like we said, like with the originals, I think the originals were far more gory and bloodier than these, except it was so outrageous and funny that it had this slapstick humor to it. I just felt like, I guess when I came out, I felt like I had just watched like a chapter of like Insidious or something. Like, it just has that feel and that look of like this 2010s kind of possession horror kind of thing going on, where it was like, yeah, there's some connective tissues to Evil Dead, but I could also very well see this being a script that was done that had nothing to do with Evil Dead, and then they were kind of like, yeah, let's tweak this and add a Book of the Dead, all that kind of stuff. and, make it part of this universe and try to make some money off of it.
Yeah, if you swap out the Necronomicon or the Book of the Dead, yeah, I could see this being fitting a much more traditional horror movie, as you're kind of saying. I will push back a little bit just in terms of, I do still think the movie's really bloody and really gory. Visceral might be a good, word to use, because a lot of it is, stabbing or, some gunshots here and there, and a little bit more as we get closer to the end that I'll just save for the spoiler-filled discussion. But there was still a lot of blood in it. I mean, it was still very gory.
There's a lot of blood. You know what? Maybe what I'm kind of looking for is wince inducing.
Yeah, you wanted to squirm. And what I will say is, this is another note that I think this movie almost overuses blood and gore to a degree, but it doesn't. Visceral is the right word.
Yeah.
I would say outside of kind of the cold open moment, my audience didn't really react to it all. There's one quick moment in that cold open that they kind of gasped at a little bit. But after that, I feel like everybody was just watching any old horror movie. No one was really squirming, reacting to the action. Even some of the things that were hinted at in the trailer, such as a cheese grater, for example, didn't really get much reaction from my audience in the end. And that was kind of one of my issues with it as well, is that I think you kind of, when you rely on gore as a shock factor in film, you sometimes become really quickly desensitized to it. So much so that after the cold open, I was basically just okay, this is what it is. And every single time there was gore or a lot of blood or whatever on screen, I was just kind of accepting it. It didn't scare me. It didn't really do anything. I did appreciate that a lot of the times they were very good visual effects makeup or practical effects, or it was quote unquote real blood, not CGI blood all the time. It did feel for the most part that it was, practical blood. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't squirm. It didn't really do much for me. It didn't unnerve me or anything,
Like I said, I seem like I'm really down on it. I mean, I'm not overly that down on it. Alyssa Sutherland, fantastic in this. She
100%. She's excellent.
Yeah, very good. And I will say, as someone that really likes, all the Evil Dead entries, I think this might be one of the best looking, especially Alyssa Sutherland's character, deadites that they've had, that was very unsettling and creepy looking. I thought they did a very good job at that.
Yeah, that's the main acting that I would want to point out as well. I think she was absolutely excellent. I thought a lot of her lines that she delivered towed the line between a caring mother and just a malevolent evil spirit, and a lot of it was really fun. That was more so the tone I was hoping the movie would kind of walk the line of. Some of her lines, even the one that's featured in the trailer, mommy's with the maggots right now, is so messed up, but so fun. That's the perfect tone of this sort of movie, I think, in this day and age.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought she was excellent. I don't have much good to say about the rest of the acting. Sadly, I don't know if you felt the same.
I'm right there with you, brother.
Okay, I think we're just kind of it's not only Rowan's thoughts. I'm kind of interjecting in this, but yeah, specifically for me, I don't know what it was, and I don't want to dunk on just the child actors, because I actually think the sister wasn't that great either. It was just I didn't find a lot of the performance authentically, they didn't really authentically react to the horror that was going on around them. There was no Mom, stop, you're scaring me, or, crying that their mother's possessed. A lot of the characters seem like they're on the verge of tears the entire movie, but can never muster a single tear, which is just a very weird feeling when I'm watching the movie, because it doesn't really evoke sadness or fear in the characters at all. And I just kind of didn't believe that they even had much of a relationship with their mother. It feels like that the relationship we saw was just created as soon as the camera started rolling. It was, I don't know, I was just kind of thinking, if I was a kid of that age and what happens to their mother in this movie happened to my mother, I would be so messed up beyond belief. It would be way more emotional, way more messed up of a movie, and I don't really know why they didn't go there to a degree. And also, just as a side note, the tenants in the rest of the high rise, on their floor, absolutely atrocious. Really, really bad stereotypes and really bad acting by all involved. And I have no qualms about calling them out. They're just very bad.
It was odd kind of, choices and characters. Like you said, especially the family, I didn't really buy it. It was just I felt like all they wanted to do, it was how like how edgy can we make each member of this family? Like the mom's like a tattoo artist or something.
Mm-hmm.
But like we're not actually like given any substance to any of these characters, you know, I guess like traits. Like she's in the tattooing. We have like Danny, who is into DJing.
A wannabe DJ.
Wannabe DJ. But it was like, it's just stuff that it didn't really matter. Like, you know.
One daughter wants to go to riots, you know, to go protest. And then the other one is like kind of a weird kid who's making like, I don't know, weird staffs with dolls' heads on and stuff. It's just like, you kind of said edgy, and at first I was like, I think that's the wrong word for it. But you know what? I think I might agree with you. It might be weirdly edgy characters.
I guess to me, like when I think about a family that is so unique as that, to me, like that would be a smart idea if this was more of like some sort of slapstick horror like the others, where like these traits might come into play and like you're kind of making fun of them. And, you know, I'm thinking about like outrageous 80s movies where like it doesn't even really make sense and you're like, this is wild. Like, and if they were playing into that, but it was just weird where it was like really dead serious.
Yeah,
it didn't really like flow with me.
Yeah, no, I'm on board with that as well. Yeah, it's one of those things where I completely understand, like in a sillier movie, like you were saying, how those characters work, and you kind of really exaggerate the traits of them, right? You make them more caricatures than an actual character. But in this, they really are trying to, you know, give some meat to these characters. And at the end of the day, the performances don't really give enough depth to really care about them, or the writing lets them down. It's just very much like, yeah, it's just weird little traits, I guess, to all the characters. You're right.
And, you know, I do want to say, like, you know, positives on it is...
Yeah, get to some positives. You've been overly negative. And so have I when I've been interjecting.
And this is going to seem, I guess, like a small thing, but I really like the title card in this. I like...
Yeah. Very good.
I thought that was fantastic. I was like, oh, this is different. And like, I just thought the image that it showed was like cool, you know, and all that kind of stuff. You know, I did like some of the updates that they did to this, like some of the updates with, you know, how these demons are kind of let out and unlocked. I mean, we know we've all seen the Evil Dead movies that a spell is going to somehow be said some way. And so I did appreciate that they tried to do something different. You know, you're not going to get the same impact in 2023 of like bringing out the real tape from, you know, the 70s and 80s and spinning it all up and then playing it. And so I did like the kind of update and the nod, because obviously, like we said, it's a very unique family. They're very, you know, like edgy hipster, like, so, you know, we do bring it up to that. So I did like that.
I like that as well. I liked how they how it was used and how the evil was summoned in this one as well. I thought it was creative, a little bit more clever than usual.
I feel like I'm bringing the Shade Brigade now, because I did really enjoy this, and then in the spoiler section I'll talk about what I didn't enjoy about it, but I did appreciate that we got out of the cabin. We did something a little different, and, you know, I thought the high rise, it was a cool idea, you know, especially it being like this decrepit high rise. I thought that was cool. I mean, we've now had 4 movies, you know, obviously Army of Darkness is mostly medieval times, but even that, like, there's a whole front section where we just relive number 2 again. But, yeah, I appreciate that they said, all right, let's push this out and try to do something different with it.
Yeah. Some positives for me, because I think we've actually gone over all the negative aspects that I would have mentioned as well. I think the strongest aspect of the film for me overall is actually the sound design, which sadly it wasn't enough to drown out the 2 separate groups of teenagers talking incessantly in the back corners of my theater throughout the entire thing, nonstop. People yelled at them. There was almost a fight that broke out at one point. Not even joking. They just would not shut the fuck up.
We had someone whose phone kept ringing.
Oh my God. Almost as distracting. Probably not quite. But what I'll say is Evil Dead Rise makes very good use of its 3D soundscape, where I think it really enhanced the experience of being able to watch the movie like smack dab in the middle of the theater for me. Like whispers felt like whispers, like someone actually whispering over my shoulder. The screams were similarly like piercing, that actually one of them in the movie made one of my ears pop. And I don't know if it was just like coincidence or if it was at a weird frequency or what it was, but it was literally like, did I just blow an eardrum? Like for a second, I was kind of trying to make my ears pop after the fact. And I think it did do a good job of creating an unnerving tone at times that could make the hairs on your neck stand on end. But it was, it was the mix, the sound mix. It wasn't like the visuals. It wasn't the movie itself. It was just like an eerie sound that I was like, oh, it's evoking something from me. And like, sure, most movies are in theaters are supposed to work this way and have like a really good sound mix and be a full 3D experience, something that you can't get at home. But I find most movies nowadays in theaters are so muddled to the point where you can barely distinguish from the score and the dialogue. So I just really wanted to point it out. I thought that was specifically strong in the movie. Additionally, another technical aspect that I really liked in the movie is I thought a lot of the cinematography was pretty energetic. I don't know if I'd go so far to say inspired, but a lot of it was really interesting. I like the use of Dutch angles, how everything was like slightly askew and kind of oscillating back and forth. The fisheye lens were used to probably great effect, some of which, once again, you've seen in the trailer. But probably the most noticeable camera technique or lens that they used was the split diopter shots, where things in the foreground are in focus and in the background. And lots of times it's, to split two characters or to isolate them in the scene. And I just thought they were really well done. I always appreciate a split diopter shot. Most movies can only get away with one. I'd say this movie had 4 or 5 or 6 of them. And even though sometimes you'd be able to see where the split was in the image, I still really liked most of them. I thought they were used effectively. Once again, can't get away with saying a little negative. The usual Evil Dead kind of camera gliding shots didn't really do much for me this time around. I don't know if you felt the same, but I was kind of whatever about them. I don't know.
Like you, I thought a lot of the camera and the work in this was great. And that's where I felt it kind of faltered, because I appreciate that they didn't try to change it. That's always been like a continuous thing in all these movies. Mm-hmm. But you could tell that Sam Raimi definitely made sure that it was like a guy with a camera in his hand, and it was shaky, and they polished it a little too much, where I was like, it's just not like frenetic enough, and it's too smooth. It doesn't like it bouncing all around like helps create that terror. And I don't want to say terror. It's not like those are scary in the originals, but it has a look. It's always had a look. And they just kind of decided they wanted to weave from it, away from it in this one. And I just didn't think it was as effective.
Yeah, I think when it's like bouncing and jittering all around like that, I think it kind of evokes almost like that it's not human, because most people, when they're recording things in film, it's not like out of focus, jerking all around, like hard to focus, where when Sam Raimi used those techniques, it was literally just a dude running through the woods, so everything was all messed up. And obviously we're long past those times now in this movie, and I mean, there's even a part near the beginning of the movie where it basically straight up references it that I won't mention the specifics of here, but it was the kind of thing where I was like, okay, I'm glad it was at least referenced, because that was a really poor version of that shot, in my opinion. And I'm sure you know which one I'm talking about. But yeah, that's basically all my spoiler-free notes, because we just kind of hashed it out when you were going over it. So, Rowan, well, you never said if you'd recommend it or not. Where do you fall on this?
I mean, I'm gonna recommend it. It wouldn't really matter what my thoughts on this were. It's Evil Dead. Go support Evil Dead. I mean, as many of these as we can get, let's get them. But I think in general, even if you have no connection to any of the other movies, I think there's a good time to be had in this. There's enough good things in it, and if you're you're a gore person or whatever, there's enough gore in it that you're going to be pretty satisfied with what you get. And well, go see it. I think it's worth it. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, I'm on a similar note. I think I'd give it a soft recommendation. It's not like a full-hearted, full-throated recommendation. Obviously, if you're a fan of the Evil Dead franchise, you've probably seen this already before you're even listening to this podcast. But yeah, I don't know. This one didn't completely work for me, and I think we'll get into some more of the details or a little bit more in-depth in our spoiler discussion. So that's a soft recommendation from you, a recommendation from yourself. Or a soft recommendation from me and a full recommendation from yourself. And I think it's probably time to cut to the spoiler discussion for Evil Dead Rise. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Evil Dead Rise, so if you've not seen Evil Dead Rise, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, we did a lot of talking in the spoiler-free talk, but I could tell that you were, tiptoeing around certain elements. So here you go. Now's the time. What do you want to say?
Well, I want to say, first of all, just so you guys don't look like idiots like myself, this movie, it's called Evil Dead Rise. It's not Evil Dead Rises, which I think I've been saying all week. I'm like, I can't wait to go see that Evil Dead Rises. And then when the title card came up and said Evil Dead Rise, I was like, wait a second. I was like, is that what this is called?
It's the rising out of the water. It's the high rise. It's the franchise has risen. It's back from the dead,
I guess what I'll start with is we get this beginning scene, which obviously they were smart enough to be like, you know what, we got to have something with a cabin in the woods.
Yes.
I mean, we are talking about, the film that, originated the title, The Cabin in the Woods. Mm-hmm. So you got to do it. But did it add anything to this movie? Not really.
Other than a cool title card.
Other than the cool title card.
And the only gore effect that made my audience have a visceral reaction, which was the really quick scalp, like, when the girl gets scalped really quick, like split second, it made my audience they were awake at that point.
Yeah. I felt like, I appreciated it, but at the same time, obviously we kind of get this, these bookends at the beginning and the end that have no connection, really.
No. And honestly, I think it might detract a little bit from the movie in the end, that there was just another floor directly below or directly above, whatever it winds up being, that they're just chilling. Just hanging out.
It was just kind of stupid in general, I felt. And I was like, we didn't really need to use that time to, build the characters up a little more. I do want to talk to you about cheese graters. I feel like
let's do it.
We got to have the discussion. So, I think this is the talking point of the movie. Everyone kind of references this movie. Already when people are talking about seeing it, they're like the cheese grater scene, and you kind of, you get the tease in the trailer of the cheese grater scene. And I don't know about you, but I've never been let down so much by a cheese grater in my life.
I've had gnarlier accidents when I fell off my bike as a child and scraped my knee. It's looked worse than the cheese grater scene. Yeah, it's literally just like a little scrape on her leg, and I don't even think there's any skin or anything that kind of comes up from the grater itself or anything that. It's just literally like a scrape.
And it's like one grate and we're done. That's it.
One quick shot. Yeah, she drags it for 6 to 8 inches or whatever along her leg. There's a couple of lines there, but it's not a big moment in the movie. It's not like a huge gore effect, and it's not even one of the good gore effects in the movie. It literally looks just like a couple of bloody lines along her leg.
Yeah, and this is where, when I was discussing how I felt like it just couldn't really pick the tone, it was set pieces like this where, if this was Sam Raimi doing this, that would have lasted 2 minutes. It would have been outrageous. It would have probably looked super corny, but it would have been, it just would have been played for laughs of, oh my God.
It would have been like stop motion claymation shit coming out of the cheese grater, some green and yellow squirting out or something,
And then, where the 2013 one was so successful is, if they did it, it would be the most uncomfortable scene you've ever seen. And it would also be dragged out, but for a totally different aspect of just you being like, oh my God, I can't believe they're they're going this far and they're showing this. And like I said, this all added up to me of why I felt like I was watching, you know, gory and Insidious or something. Like, it was just kind of like they give you that initial like shock scare, but then it's like, all right, on to the next thing. Like, that's fine. Like, you get the idea, it's horrific. And it was just, I felt like so much of that, of like the gore, you know, like we said, just it wasn't visceral enough for me. Like, there was a lot of knife stabbings in this, which, you know, I'm not huge on the old knife stabbings in the Evil Dead movies. I think it works in the first one when we have the cool ass looking knife.
Well, you're not a big knife guy anyways. I remember even in our Scream 6, you know, now slang, we talked about that. It's just, you know, sometimes it works, but most of the time it is kind of just goofy, you know, going at it, you know, just stabbing over and over again or whatnot.
Yeah, and it was just like, I felt like so much of the stuff that should have been off-putting or weird just kind of fell flat. Like, I think when we have the mother come in, she's kind of first possessed, and like she starts doing the, you know, throwing the eggs into the frying pan. And like, I don't know how you felt, but the whole time I'm like, all right, like, where's this going? Something's gonna happen. She's gonna, I don't know, like put it on her skin or something, or like torture someone with it. And it's like, no, she's just gonna throw it on the floor. Like, there was just really nothing to it. And that's how I felt about half of the things going on here.
I did like that scene just because I did think the egg throwing was, I was waiting for some sort of tension release, right? And you basically said it. It's anticlimactic how it goes, but I thought it was kind of neat to see like blood in eggs in the movie, I guess, because one of my old roommates, almost every single time he'd go and make eggs, there'd somehow be a blood vessel in one of them. And he had bloody eggs more than any dude I've known. And I've luckily, knock on wood, I've never seen bloody eggs. I'm good. But in this movie, when she's cracking them, there's like 3 or 4 of them. You just kind of know something's off. I mean, is that horrific? No, not really. But I thought it was just a neat detail.
They need to go to a different grocery store.
You mentioned the gore. What about the moment when the guy's eyeball gets eaten and then she spits it across the hallway and lands in another guy's mouth and he swallows it and starts choking? What do you think about moments like that in this movie?
So, and this is where, sadly, I just think in someone else's hands it would have worked. It just, like I said, this is Evil Dead. If she's gonna bite the eye out of him, like, we want to see the eye get bitten out of him instead of just this back shot of the back of her head, him screaming. Like, we don't actually ever see it. We just, like, then you see the eye, you know, she spits it out, the eye flies.
Flying through the air, you see it, yeah, but not in the actual act of it being removed, yeah.
Yeah, and, like, that was, like, it was fine. It was just, like I said, like, I think, and I know it's not fair, I think the real issue with all this stuff is that, you know, I think as time has gone on that, you know, it's a pretty kind of unanimous thought that, like, I mean, the Evil Dead remake is considered one of the best horror remakes, like, ever done now.
Oh yeah, it definitely has like a cult following around it. And even when it first came out, I remember a lot of people feeling very favorably about it. Myself included, right? You know, I haven't gone back to watch it, but you know, I still have fond memories of it, as I said in the intro.
And this is where I try to be careful with this, because when I saw it in the theater, which I saw it with Mike in the theater, like, I remember coming out of the remake and hating it. I was like, this is stupid. And then as time goes on,
I think it's a movie that's much more my sensibilities than yours most of the time, to tell you the truth, the Evil Dead remake.
Yeah, although now as time goes on, like, depending on the day you ask me, there's lots of days that I think it is the best entry in Evil Dead.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. So spoiler if we ever review that, I guess. But, yeah, like I said, there was stuff that worked. I wanted to get in, like, the voice work was fantastic. I did say in the spoiler-free section, but it needs to be said in the spoiler section, too. Like, the deadite demonic voice was awesome. I thought it was super creepy.
Specifically from the mother you're talking about, right? Or do you mean among all of them?
I mean, they were all fine, but yeah, the Alyssa Sutherland stuff was fantastic. Yeah. Like the eye contacts, like, I thought that all worked like so well.
Yeah. What do you think about the sister becoming possessed? Because we keep talking about Alyssa Sutherland and how great she is, and I completely agree. But, you know, we're not talking about Gabriel Eccles, who's the other one that gets pretty possessed. And that's probably a slight spoiler, for the movie, that I don't remember seeing her possessed in the trailer. So it's kind of like the movie. I think the movie was kind of leading you to believe that a lot of the kids were going to be invulnerable for, the first probably 30, 40 minutes of the movie. And then eventually she's the one that, kicks the bucket first. And then eventually the brother as well. What do you think of her deadite? Because I'm definitely more mixed on that one.
I just think the acting wasn't strong in it.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of,
They put a sheet on her? Or
they
a comforter for a good bit? I don't know.
They put a sheet on her. I just think the other movies dealt with the spreading of the possession so much better than this one, where there wasn't like any tension or anything built on like, kind of this transformation of someone else becoming a deadite. And like, it's just kind of like, my cheeks got, now I'm becoming a deadite. Like, oh.
Yeah, you see like a CGI kind of black spider web come out from the cut, and then eventually it turns into real makeup, and then, they become the deadite, essentially. What do you think of the peephole shot? Because they keep going back to that peephole shot, and that's obviously a fisheye lens where it's meant to distort everything. At first, I kind of liked it when the mom was on the other side of the door, but I don't know if I liked it when it was showing from that point of view when she kills like half a dozen people. That was when it got goofy, and I could also tell that I was using CGI blood to kind of splash over the fisheye lens itself. It was just, I don't know. It's one of those things where, once again, it's like it's a good idea, and then it kind of goes on too long, or it's just, I don't know. It's not as effective.
See, I didn't mind it. I just didn't think, like, to me, if we're gonna use it multiple times and kind of essentially just kill everyone in the building that we know through this like fisheye lens, like, I don't know, I would have liked to see it. Like, it was all mostly off screen.
Yeah, I think you see like a guy's arm get ripped off, really quickly in it, and then maybe a gunshot or something. I don't know.
It would be like something would happen, but then like, the deadite was always kind of like pushing them out of the view, and then you might see something flying, and I was like, to me, I was like, if we kind of saw everything and it was, just this kind of like brutal, scene where you're like, holy shit, is this gonna end? Like, what's going on? Where
go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, and this was the issue with all these people in the apartment in general, is they didn't matter. Like, and it wasn't even, it was like they tried to set up these like stupid, just kind of like ideas about them, which, like you said, were just like these weird stereotypical, kind of character traits. And like, it just doesn't matter, because guess what? Like, in the matter of a minute and 30 seconds, they're all gonna die together, and then they have no bearing at all in the rest of the story.
Yeah, one of their purposes is just, for the old gun nut to bring a shotgun into this movie so our character can have a shotgun in the third act. That's literally one of his, the only reason he's in the movie. The one thing I was going to say about the fisheye lens, going back to it, I think the most effective fisheye lens in the entire movie is actually in the cold open. And it's a little bit more of a more subtle one. I mean, it's still very obvious, but it's where they have the cabin itself in center frame, and then all the trees and kind of the hills around it are all kind of encroaching, like curving towards the camera, the cabin. And that's a really good shot. I really like that. I mean, that's very evocative of Evil Dead, with the trees coming to life and all that stuff. I very much appreciated that shot.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, like, when I saw the cabin, I was like, have I been fooled? Is this actually a Cabin in the Woods movie? Which I kind of wish I got that movie, because I thought it was kind of cool, because Evil Dead, even the remake, like, they've always used the same kind of style of this old, decrepit cabin, where I was like, I kind of like this because it's kind of this like contemporary new age design cabin. And I was just like, man, could I live in this? Like, could we be in this world for a little bit? Like, I think that's where they could have really brought like this kind of contemporary, attempt at a more elevated horror thing to it, where I was like, yeah, like that would have been a cool idea also.
Out of curiosity, did it bother you as much as it bothered me that none of the teens really had smartphones or computers or laptops or access to anything of the outside world? Am I just like being weirdly nitpicky? But like, I understand they get one character to say like, oh, it's weird. No calls are getting out of my cell phone. And, and I think the aunt as well has a cell phone that gets broken at one point. But I just found it really weird that there was at least 2 teenage characters in this movie and a kid, and they never had any sort of smartphone, cell phones. There's no laptop. This kid is a wannabe DJ. Nowadays, with a wannabe DJ, you'd be mixing and putting tracks on your laptop or your
which they
computer and
were
whatnot.
they were they did a terrible job at as someone that knows how to DJ and used to DJ. They had like some sort of Serato going on the laptop, even though they were mixing and they only had 1 wave, so they didn't even have the 2 waves going, the mix one and scratch.
Okay, I may have missed the shot of the laptop.
Yeah,
but
they did
but
show
it
the
was just
laptop.
like I was confused.
The laptop
Yeah.
wave was not doing what it should do when you're actually like.
Well, that's fine, but
Yeah, I knew they were just you got to fake the funk. But yeah, I mean, DJ equipment isn't cheap. Their setup would have been like probably a couple $1,000s. So, that's where I was like, well, why don't these guys have phones? Like, they obviously could afford, like, all this turntable gear. And
yeah, it was just like the movie addresses it to some degree. And I almost wonder, like, would have the movie been stronger if it was a slight period piece before this shit? Would it have been stronger if it just didn't address it at all? It was just kind of like, it almost felt like it kind of shone a spotlight on the issue where, for whatever reason, for me, it was just kind of another, like, level of, like, there's just like this movie doesn't feel authentic to me. There's just like this level of artifice when I was watching it that just kind of kept me at arm's length with it, I guess. There was also kind of a question as I was watching it. Like we already said, all the neighbors, they get possessed, they become deadites. It's not like a big part of the movie. I was wondering, like, is this movie just slightly more effective if it is just a 1 or 2 deadite scenario in a high rise, just in one apartment? The mom's possessed, the kid gets possessed, another one's getting possessed, type of thing, like a little bit smaller scale. I was kind of just wondering because, like, once again, this movie tries to kind of have more of a story and a more serious tone, specifically with the mother and her sister's relationship, or the sister kind of coming to basically have to become a mother herself, essentially, right? And it's just, I don't know. It's so weird. I'm like, there is a kind of a really stripped back version of this that is probably a little bit more of the elevated horror and less Evil Dead that then pisses off Evil Dead fans, and I would probably like it a little bit more. I don't know. Once again, when I was watching it, I was like, I feel like I would have preferred the stripped back version of this to a degree. But
I mean, to me, that's exactly what I think it needed, except they needed to be taking a break from city life and living in the contemporary cabin for a weekend. Because to me, I think what the movie proved was I don't know if we can take this story out of the cabin. I like the freshness of it not being in the cabin, but I feel so much of the stuff that didn't work for me. I was just like, part of the, tension in these Evil Dead movies is like this isolation factor. It's always been like the woods are after us, that kind of thing. It just doesn't have the same effect when it's like, oh, the elevator cords are after you.
Yeah, it's like, oh, there was an earthquake and now all the stairs from this floor in particular has fallen and you can't jump down 2 floors, or the elevator is out of commission, and the doors keep slapping together. It's I don't know. I appreciate it as well, and I think it could have worked. It just would have felt different. Like, once again, we're kind of going back to how this movie at times doesn't really feel like an Evil Dead movie. It feels like something from the early 2010s around there, and then there's an Evil Dead lens kind of projected onto it.
Yeah, because there's a lot of scenes with like Alyssa Sutherland where I'm thinking especially the stuff in the tub where she's like jumping up onto the ceiling, and we're doing a lot of contorting stuff like that. Where I'm like, I feel like I'm watching The Exorcism of Emily Rose or something. Like, this feels like a exorcism movie more so than it feels like an Evil Dead movie.
I wonder why when they do those effects in a lot of these movies, they always feel the need to kind of speed it up unnaturally or like make it like a little bit jerky. I wonder why, because I mean, that sort of body movement is still really messed up when it's played in normal speed. I don't know, like, who decided that it has to be done unnaturally fast. It kind of draws attention to the effect when you do it that way. I don't know who decided that was a great idea. I have another note. What do you think of the Shining reference? Very obvious blood elevator.
Yeah, listen, I always appreciate horror references, even if they're not great or whatever. I mean, we also, the son's name is Danny.
Fair.
I guess it shouldn't surprise me we got the Shining reference. I was gonna say, I guess on top of that, like, I did like the little nods to the rest of the movie. So like you said, like the stairwell being out instead of the bridge to the cabin being, bent and out. We get the chainsaw, the shotgun.
And you liked that, did you? Like, you liked
well, I don't
the
think
inclusion of the chainsaw and the shotgun and whatnot? Or
I mean, no.
did you like when everyone started chanting Dead by Dawn because that's the original subtitle of Evil Dead 2?
Well, I am actually a fan of that because I was like, okay, like this is what the Deadites yell in those movies.
All right.
So I appreciated that they did go for that. My theory is, unless you're going to wear that chainsaw on your cut off arm, just keep the chainsaw out of it. Because chainsaws are made to be replacing your hands, not using uninspiredly and then, deciding we're going to recreate the horror version of Fargo.
Well, yeah, like, speaking of that, we still haven't mentioned the ultimate monster at the end of this movie somehow, and, we've been recording for quite a while here. What do you think of when the mom Deadite kind of reconsumes her two children? Obviously it's hinted at earlier in the movie where the mom says something along the lines of, like, I'm just dreaming of cutting myself open and bringing you guys inside me, or cutting you guys open and slipping inside your skin. It's kind of like the mother, it's almost like a reverse birth in a way, taking these children back inside of her, and they kind of create this, like, monster with 3 heads and multiple limbs, and it's kind of ambling along. What do you think of it?
I mean, tell me that you enjoy watching Color Out of Space without telling me that you watched Color Out of Space.
For me, you haven't got to this yet, but it very much reminded me of a similar monster in The Last of Us Part 2. I won't say anything considering the HBO series is such a big, big show now, but what I will say is that sort of idea was used to much greater effect, I think. For me, it didn't
work for me either. Like, I appreciate the swing. I appreciate the attempt. I just don't think it fell. And I just think, even though most of them are, they were all made out of like clay and use claymation. Like, I just think, the real monstrous Deadites that were created in the series were far more imaginative than that was. So I kind of was a little disappointed.
Yeah, I was disappointed by it as well. But, the scene where it's killed is like one of those scenes where I'm saying, like, obviously it's really bloody. I mean, the wood chipper's going, there's blood coming from the sky. She's literally eviscerating them with the chainsaw and stuff. There's a lot on the go. But once again, there's not much impact to it. I was just kind of like, yeah, it's bloody. This is gory, whatever. Let's get on with it. Specifically in that moment, like, when she has the shotgun in one arm and she says, come and get it, and it's like the badass action line, and then, eventually the chainsaw gets thrown over to her. Like, I was very much almost expecting Beth to literally say groovy at the end of this movie, like, literally the way it was going. It was so, like, on the nose that I was, like, kind of annoyed with it. And maybe that's my issue with this movie. Maybe I don't want it to be an Evil Dead movie. Everything I'm kind of pointing at is like, I only want 2 Deadites, and I want it to be in an apartment, and I don't want it to kind of be an Evil Dead thing. It was just the vibe at which this movie was going for so much of the movie didn't feel like an Evil Dead movie. And then they force in all this Evil Dead stuff that then feels incongruous with, like, the movie that we've been watching. And it's very strange. It's just... it's a little confused.
Well, and this is kind of the last main point I had, which I think is where this, that stuff doesn't work. Like you said, you're just expecting her to say groovy or something, but none of the passing of the torch of Evil Dead is earned in this to this main character, the sister. Like, the whole reason that every single one of the Evil Dead entries work at the end is that you go through, like, this cathartic feeling. Like, these characters, from Bruce Campbell to the female lead in the 2013 one, like, they go through hell. Their bodies are, they're missing limbs. They're barely alive. All of their friends and families have just been, murdered and all this stuff. And then they get to have that triumphant ending of guts and glory and all this stuff where to me, I just felt like there was no cathartic feeling in this because the sister really, like nothing extreme happens to her. There's nothing, that all the other characters had all the terrible things happen to them where I felt the sister kind of got out scot-free. Like, it was like, all right, cool. And yeah, I guess I'm going to finish it off. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think it was missing some mean-spiritedness. Like, 2013 was just mean. It was just like, we are going to be so terrible to our lead that, like, you're like, they're not going to live through this. Where this one, it was just kind of like, whatever.
I think it was missing a swollen, half-drunken Russell Crowe doing a weird accent coming in to try and get the evil spirits out of
Bring him in.
But yeah, no, I would agree with you. And as you kind of talk about the sister more and more, I'm like, yeah, maybe she didn't even need to be in this. Maybe it is just as an effective movie of a mom who's been recently left by her husband, deadbeat father sending child support from away, and basically she's grappling with trying to take care of her children. She gets possessed, and basically it's the children having to decide at the end of the day, what are they going to do? Are they going to kill their mother? What's happening? Some of them get possessed. Maybe that is a stronger movie. I don't know.
Well, to me, I would have rather no sister and then make this Ash character like the youngest sibling there, like the youngest kid. I mean, the kid murders their own sister.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to me, like, put her through that hell. Because to me, that would be, I mean, most, people aren't sickos like me. So most people would be like, I don't want to watch this, like this kid going through hell. But to me, that'd be a far more interesting film. And then you could really have like this kid, overcome it, cut off the kid's hand. Just then the kid a kid with a chainsaw hand. I'm all right with that.
Yeah. I'd probably be a little bit okay with the kid being the final girl as well. But Rowan, anything else we want to say before we get into reviewing this thing?
No, I think we've touched pretty much everything.
All of my notes are covered. So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give Evil Dead Rise?
So I seemed pretty down on it.
You did. I feel like we definitely talked more negative than positive.
We definitely talked more negative than positive. But I did have a fairly enjoyable time. The runtime, it's only an hour and a half. So luckily, this moves pretty quickly, and it's not something that's overly long, and you're like, oh my god, just end my life now. So this is probably a tough one. I think I'm gonna give it a strong okay. I'll give it a strong okay.
Okay.
I was gonna give it a light yay, but like I said, I'm always like, what else have I given a yay? And I don't think it's a yay yet. Maybe, like I said, I was this down on the remake of Evil Dead, and now, that's an awesome film for me. So who knows? Maybe I will, in 10 years, I'll be like, oh, I was totally wrong on this take. I don't think I will be, but I feel this is good. I know a lot of the reviews I've been seeing are positive on this. I've been seeing a lot on Letterboxd, a lot of 4 stars going around. But I'll be curious once we've all stepped back from the excitement of Evil Dead coming out, if we look at this and say, yeah, like this definitely is, to me, I think this is the weakest entry into the franchise. But on the positive, I mean, there's a lot of franchises that have some pretty shitty entries, and I think
True.
I think this is fine. Like, I'd probably watch this again, and I think, for a franchise that's been going this long, we can't complain when it gets something as weak as this, but, not complete dog shit. So, yeah, I'll give it a strong okay. What about you, Colton?
Yeah, surprisingly, we're on pretty much the same page. I would give it just a flat okay. I think the technicals for the most part in the movie are really good. Like I said, the sound mixing, the sound design is very good overall. I think the cinematography for the most part really worked for me. We've kind of just said it in passing, but a lot of the makeup is very strong with the contact work and a lot of the gore, specifically on Alyssa Sutherland, which obviously enhances her performance as well, but also she's just so great as Ellie, the possessed mother in this movie, that it's just like a clear standout. And maybe if she was weaker, the rest of the crew would look a little bit better, but like she's so excellent that it's just any other performance in the movie falls flat for me. I've already mentioned all the negatives, or all the things that didn't really work for me. So yeah, this isn't okay. What I will say is that I am kind of shocked by some of the reviews that I've been reading. On my friends, there's some like 4.5 stars, and it's just we're not on the same page, but that's fine. I'm surprised we are, you and I, with this, but yeah, it's gonna be an okay for me. I can't see myself watching it like anytime soon. It's probably like whenever the next one comes out, this will probably do well enough in theaters. It has pretty great reviews and whatnot. That maybe I'll check it out, or maybe it'll just be like the 2013 where I remember it well enough, or I feel like I do, and I just move on to the next entry. Who knows? So yeah, if you made it this far in the podcast and you're not following us already on our social medias, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Slasher, Letterboxd. Basically, if there's a social media, we're there at It Slays Podcast, and would very much appreciate the follow. And if you want to help the show financially, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Patrick, Mark, Steven, Joy, and Carvey, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Now, Rowan, go ahead and plug the playlist.
Yeah, so if you're in the spooky music, go to Spotify to the It Slays Podcast Horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, go to any of the social media links mentioned before and go to the link tree, and we have a link into it right there. And yeah, we put up music from movies we review, or iconic horror movies, or just horror movies we love. So yeah, go take a listen to the playlist and get your spooky music on.
No real music that stood out in this one, eh? Like no needle drops that I can really think of?
All score. I'm interested to see, because I think I saw they're already planning on giving this a vinyl release.
Interesting. Maybe it'd stand out a little bit more just listening to it by itself, maybe. Yeah, it doesn't stand out in my mind, but yeah. And yeah, next time on the show, we'll be reviewing Beau is Afraid, which as we record this, one of us has already seen it, and one thing's for certain, there will be much to discuss on that episode. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.